Hello, my name is Debbie from healingfrombpd.org, and you may not have recognized me initially because I don't really look like this. This is actually supposed to be me from the past. I've invited my younger self to come and share with you how borderline personality disorder originally appeared in my life and the debilitating symptoms that were initially there, to give you hope, to let you see that people can and do overcome borderline personality disorder when they are equipped with the right skills and support and all of that good stuff. And please don't despair if you don't have all of those things at your access right now, because if you go to my Facebook page, I'm always posting resources and ways to connect with help and assistance that are available all over the world. Pretty much no matter where you're at, and a lot of them are available online. So let's get started. Let me just get into my character here. I'm going to go through the symptoms of borderline personality disorder, or the criteria more accurately, to tell you how they're appearing in my life now as past Debbie. And then we can talk about how those things have resolved themselves or improved or changed over the years, so you can get hope, because you might see yourself in my story from the past and all of the things and ways that borderline personality disorder has shown up and been a destructive force in my life, pretty much almost destroying it. And my acknowledgement and realization at some point that I was in control of that and could take charge was pivotal in my healing. And I talk about that in both of my books, Healing from Borderline Personality Disorder, My Journey Out of Hell through Dialectical Behavior Therapy, and the Stop Sabotaging book. And you must meet 5 or more, and it has to be a clinician or a doctor who actually does the diagnosis, so no self-diagnosing here. But okay, so let me give you a little background first. I was about 19 or 20 years old when I was coming out of yet another psychiatric inpatient hospitalization visit. This one was about 3 weeks long. I was a frequent visitor to the psychiatric hospital. I often felt out of control emotionally. I felt completely dysregulated, suicidal, afraid to be alone, terrified to be alone, especially with those thoughts and when those thoughts would come up. So I was in and out of psychiatric hospitals for my early 20s. Mostly voluntarily, sometimes 5150, which here is when they put you in against your will. They're afraid that you're a danger to yourself, somebody else, and they put you in, observe you, and then let you go when they feel you're fine. So this recent time, let's say, when I was about 19 or 20, they put on my discharge paperwork, rule out borderline personality disorder. And this was in the late 90s. And borderline personality disorder was a very scary thing to have, like the name of it alone. It's not to say that there's no stigma now, because we know we're dealing with it now. That's no secret. But back then it was like really bad. Like there was so much stigma in the profession. You just did not want to have that diagnosis whatsoever. I hadn't even heard of DBT. I think it had only come out 3 years before I was diagnosed, or before I had the rule out diagnosis on my paperwork. So this was not a popular thing that many people knew about. There hadn't been a lot of practitioners having experience with people getting well from borderline at that point. So yes, so here we come to the criteria. Frantic efforts to avoid real or imagined abandonment. From my 20s up until recent years, I have been terrified, and I mean terrified, in the context of a relationship, that someone was going to abandon me. It doesn't matter in the context of a lover's relationship, where it was, you're living together and you're afraid that person is just going to wake up one day and stop loving you, or he or she is running late from work, or forgot to call for some reason, or seems irritated, and you automatically jump to the conclusion of, they don't love me anymore, they're leaving me, this is it, they're gone. And I would believe this, totally believe it, and become really desperate, and I would really become suicidal. I would threaten suicidal things, end up in the hospital. I was just so desperate to avoid being abandoned or rejected by people that love me or thought love me, people that I love. A pattern of unstable and intense interpersonal relationships characterized by extremes between idolization and devaluation, also known as splitting. I can definitely see this. The pattern of unstable and intense interpersonal relationships. When I was 18, ran away on a Greyhound bus to Seattle from Boston with my friend. I was just going to say his name. We ran away to Seattle, and in Seattle, overnight by the way, no planning, just got on a Greyhound bus, left all our stuff behind, totally sabotaged our lives at that time as young people. And when I got there, a bunch of events happened. They were doing some memorial stuff for Kurt Cobain, and we went to Courtney Love's house, and that's a whole different story. Did not meet her, but it was an adventure. And it was there that over the phone I met the man that I would marry at 18, and he was 30. I did not know he was an alcoholic. I did not know that he was a substance abuser. I didn't know that he was, because of those things and his own severe history of, things that happened to him, how bad it was going to be. It was really intense, really, really intense. I can't even get into all of it on here. Very unstable. And then also each of us strayed from the relationship, and I was pretty much looking for love, looking for someone to let me know it was okay, looking for someone to take care of me, to protect me, and someone who wouldn't leave me. And I ended up getting involved at one point with a coworker who was the same age as my mother. And it's can I just leave it at it was unstable and intense? So definitely that one, and that wasn't the only incident. There were several others like that, so can definitely relate to that one. Identity disturbance, markedly or persistently unstable self-image or sense of self. Yes, especially in my early 20s, I had no idea who I was. As in your early 20s, a lot of times you don't fully have a formed identity, right? You're still kind of navigating the world and figuring out what you like and what you want to do and what you want to be. But it was a lot different for me in terms of, it says markedly or persistent unstable self-image or sense of self. So what I would notice is, and I know other people in the BPD community have talked about this before, for example, if I would go to a job, for a childcare job, I would become exactly what I thought that they wanted. And I know that in some ways that's a very not tactful, but effective interviewing method that everyone tries to use. But I would notice the mannerisms and the personality of the person interviewing me and look around the office, not in a scheming, like, I'm going to figure out what this person's all about, and then I'm going to act like them, and then I'm going to get the job. It wasn't like that. It was just automatic, really. And I wanted them to like me, and I wanted to be accepted. And even if in the midst of the interview, I didn't even think the job was right for me or that I even wanted it, I would still continue to emulate like a chameleon, try to be like this person so that they would give me the job. And because of this, over the years, I've had a tremendous success rate of getting offers from interviews, tons, but a really hard time sticking with actual jobs, because there would come a time when I would realize or think, this isn't me, I don't like this, and then I would go and want to do something else. So I would jump from job to job to job to job to job, moving around the country, just thinking that I could find myself through all these things, but obviously it didn't work. And it wasn't until I started DBT, actually, that I started to even get a sense of who I am as a person. I had no idea. I even went into relationships with men, older men, where I would change my style of music, I would change my diet, I would change the way I dressed, the way I did my hair, to become what I thought that they wanted, because I wanted them to want me. I wanted them to love me, and I thought that I should let them mold me into what would be the perfect woman for them. It didn't occur to me, and I didn't really make any effort to figure out what I wanted. And anytime I did sense an opinion come up that maybe was in conflict with this person that I was trying to connect with and be with, that might be in opposition, it really, really terrified me. Because what if I expressed it and it pushed them away and they left? So definitely can relate to this criteria, definitely. Okay, impulsive behavior in at least 2 areas that are potentially self-damaging. For example, spending, sex, substance abuse, reckless driving, binge eating. So maybe I should give a trigger warning right here, and then I'll go like that again when I'm done talking about it, because this might be more triggering than other information. The spending, yes, I would go into MAC Cosmetics or different stores like that and spend about $500 at a time on cosmetics. You don't even know how many lipsticks you can come home with when you spend $500 on your credit card. I'm telling you. Only to have someone who did love me and care about me say, you need to go to the store right now, like right this second, and return these. And I would, and there was a humiliation and all of that good stuff and the shame. The sex, I loved sex when I was in my early 20s. If I felt there was a potential to really be loved, I didn't go like around whoring, if you will. Like, I haven't been with many people. Substance abuse, not really. Well, I don't know. I don't know if you consider nicotine a substance. It kind of is. I smoked 1 to 2 packs of cigarettes a day, and it still wasn't enough. So I was a chain smoker. I know that may be really hard to believe, but it's true. I was often homeless in my early 20s, so that was how, at that time, I tried to cope with the stress of it, I guess, and to suppress my appetite because I didn't always have money to eat. So cigarettes were more affordable than food to me in my mind and in reality at that time in the late 90s. So I was doing something like that to my body, which I knew was bad. I also smoked marijuana from time to time, and I did go between binge eating and some anorexic behaviors, not so much because of body image issues, but more because of issues around past trauma that had to do with food and availability of food and non-availability of food, and then being homeless and not having access to food. I actually, excuse me, I actually wrote in my book, my first book, Healing from Borderline Personality Disorder, about a time when I went through the Kentucky Fried Chicken drive-through, pretty much begging for food, and because it did get that down and dirty bad. So there were issues around food, less about body image, more about past trauma that was re-triggered in adulthood when I again had problems with access to food, and I get into that in that book. Let's see. Next, okay, I think I can take that off. Well, I don't know. There could be triggers in this section too, so just please use self-care. Mute it if you have to, but stay with me because there's lots of important stuff and hopefully some encouraging stuff coming up too. So, recurrent suicidal behaviors, gestures, or threats or self-harming behavior. I did talk about this already. I honestly have never tried to cut myself. I've a couple of times accidentally would allow myself to get hurt, like burned on something, but I've never actually taken anything and done that. I know that there's a stereotype that all people with borderline personality disorders are cutters or burners. It's not true. There are other ways that people hurt themselves that have nothing to do with those, and some of them are physical and some of them are mental. Some of them are all about sabotaging your life, and that was my way of self-harming. Really, it was just constant self-sabotage. But I spoke a little bit about the recurrent suicidal behavior, gestures, or threats. For me, it was mostly threats. I really did feel that desperation, although at some point I knew deep inside of myself that I really didn't want to die. I just so desperately didn't want to feel what I was feeling, and the intensity at which it was coming at me and that I was experiencing it was so overwhelming that I just felt like I couldn't handle it and thought I needed to be in the hospital to be safe. So next one is emotional instability in reaction to day-to-day events, such as intense episodic sadness, irritability, or anxiety, usually lasting a few hours and only rarely more than a few days. So I just touched on that a little bit. When you have borderline personality disorder, or many of us that have it, I should say, sadness often isn't just sadness. It's like you're going along and you're feeling pretty okay and you're feeling pretty stable. Something gets you sad. Maybe it's something on TV or something that somebody says to you or what have you. Suddenly, you can become so sad and distraught that you're like on the verge of feeling suicidal. I mean, it's that intense, and it can happen like that. The anger too, the irritability, the anxiety, it's so intense, and many times I just didn't know how to sit with my feelings, accept them, let them pass, all that. I had no language for any of that. It would just get so bad that I just needed someone to help me now. And so the emotional instability and reaction to day-to-day events, something happening at work, making a mistake, something not going right at school, something, the way my partner said something. Yeah, so all day long going like this. And that's partially why I think I was at one time originally misdiagnosed as bipolar rapid cycling, because it's just like, and not having any information about the other symptoms or that I may possibly be borderline. I can understand why they thought that, why the practitioners thought that. Chronic feelings of emptiness. Yes, but when I would really notice this more so was when I was alone. I never wanted to be alone, like at all, because suddenly when I was alone, being the chameleon type of borderline, where I would latch on to someone else and then I would gain my sense of identity from being around that person or being what I thought they wanted me to be, or who, ever I became around that person. Suddenly when there's nobody around, like let's say my significant other goes away for business for a week, I'm just sitting there with myself, and I feel so empty. Not anymore so much. I want to encourage you that if you're going through that, that is another one that can be overcome for the most part. But when you have no sense really of who you are, no real understanding of who you are at the core, it can be terrifying to be alone. You can feel so empty. So I definitely have felt that. It's just like, I wrote a post once called "You Went Away, So Where Am I?" or something like that, because that's how I described it. It's like, okay, you're here, I'm happy-go-lucky, I'm who you want me to be, I'm just like, everything feels fine, I feel safe. You're gone. All of a sudden I'm like going into a ball and feeling nauseous, not wanting to eat, like all this stuff starts happening because it feels intolerable to be alone, because suddenly I perceive and feel that I am completely empty, that I don't exist, that I'm not really here, whatever the thoughts are that come up. So definitely can relate to that. Next is inappropriate intense anger or difficulty controlling anger, frequent displays of temper, constant anger, recurrent physical fights. I didn't have a lot of these early on, except for with my, at that time, husband. I was very angry. I could get so vicious. I had no idea. I believed the stories in my head. I like to tell people now, don't believe every thought you have, because when I was younger, I did. I thought that if I thought it was my instincts, it was my intuition, which we know sometimes it is, but I believed every story I had, and I would make up stories in my head about why people did certain things, why they said certain things, why they were late for dinner, why this happened. And instead of thinking, okay, this is one possibility, this could be it, this is the story I made up, I would go to believing it and then reacting on that belief without even having evidence. And I would get so angry, and I would lash out, and I would say things that I would regret forever, like destroy relationships with words, because you can't take it back. You can apologize all you want, but if you're saying something from that place of anger, oftentimes people think, okay, well, that's what she really meant, and her guard was down and she let it out. And it's so hard to heal from that. I've begged the forgiveness of people in my life, several who just never wanted anything to do with me again, because it was just so hurtful, and they couldn't believe what I'd said, and they couldn't believe that I could change. And I think some have come around because so much time has passed and there have been so many obvious changes, but you get the point. So how anger showed up for me. And the last one on the list is transient stress-related paranoid ideation or severe dissociative symptoms. I've definitely had both of these. So pretty much I've had all the symptoms early on, especially in my early 20s up until recent years when I started going to DBT. All of them. The transient stress-related paranoid ideation, a lot of the times was around making up stories about why people, like I was telling you just now, why people are doing certain things and then really believing it, even without having any evidence. Worried that certain bad things were going to happen when I was home alone, and getting really freaked out about it, and calling 911, all that stuff, and there's nobody there. And then the severe dissociative symptoms, I never knew what that was my whole life, and a lot of that is from the PTSD too. But it's beyond just feeling spacey and daydreaming. It's kind of like you really get disconnected. Sometimes you may feel like, I'm just thinking of a time when my significant other and I were walking, and I could hear him talking and I could feel myself moving, but like I didn't feel like I was completely there. And there's other times when I've been like chopping vegetables or something, and I felt like freaked out, like maybe, I don't know how it is to be on acid, but I just imagine like, is that really my hand? It was just so weird. It's been explained to me that a lot of dissociative symptoms happen because the brain just like tries to protect you from something that's too intense, that's like come into its awareness, or you get triggered, or you think of something from the past. Even if it's as bad or worse, or not even as bad as what I just described, you're about to see it gets better. It can get so much better. You can stop destroying your life. You can stop sabotaging. You can learn skills that are going to help you to be able to tolerate and cope with all of this stuff that comes up. It may seem overwhelming. It's a process. It's one step at a time, but you don't have to stay stuck. You do not have to let this disorder take you down. You do not have to let it continue to ruin your life. You can get better. So stay tuned. Hi guys, I'm back in the present. I hope that wasn't too incredibly bizarre and strange and weird to see me in a wig, and I hope I didn't propagate the stereotype or misconception that borderline personality disorder is multiple personality disorder. I wasn't trying to have another totally different character there that was supposed to be me younger, telling you what it was like suffering from borderline personality disorder before even being diagnosed and how it was manifesting in my life. And now I'm just going to go through briefly and hopefully give you guys some hope, because that's where I was, like hugely, and I thought there was no way out. And one of the things that really depressed me often was, especially after a crisis or another episode of sabotaging or another job destroyed or another relationship gone or another spending spree, whatever it may have been, I would think, what the F? Like, this is going to be my life for the rest of my life? Like, do I just have to accept that I'm going to be in and out of hospitals, and that I'm going to be, just doing this stuff constantly, like nothing is ever going to work out for me? Like, that's what I thought. That's really what I thought, and it's not true. So nowadays, frantic efforts to avoid real or imagined abandonment, I don't do it anymore. Do I feel uncomfortable? Do I feel nervous? Do I feel upset or triggered when my significant other has to go away for something, or if I see a family member and then we have to part? Yes, I am still incredibly emotionally sensitive, and it still does affect me, and I get dysregulated, but I'm able to calm myself down, kind of soothe myself, do things to distract myself so that I can cope with the intensity of the feelings that come up, rather than run with them and think that I have to like go get a passport and go follow somebody on a plane or something, which is something I would have done in my early 20s. So I no longer do frantic efforts to avoid real or imagined abandonment. I mean, I would just change my whole life over for somebody in the past, and I will not do that now. So a pattern of unstable and intense interpersonal relationships characterized by extremes between idolization and devaluation, also known as splitting. Well, because I was so heartbroken by my inability to maintain friendships and relationships, I've only started in the last few years getting back into trying to connect with people through doing things like going to yoga, and I'm going to a Spanish conversational group, things like that. So I haven't had a lot of unstable and intense personal relationships. I've had a couple, which I've blogged about in the recent years, where I would get attached to a new coworker or somebody, and like my feelings would get so intense and overwhelming for them, like really early on. So I can understand that. But as far as a pattern, I don't see that anymore. And I've been with the person I'm with right now for going on 12 years, so that's not very unstable. And it's not like intense, crazy or anything. We hardly ever fight. So the splitting early on, I did do that a lot. It was like, he's like my everything. He's, oh my God, he's my God. And then, why am I with this person? Like, he disgusts me, and blah, blah, like, so I would do that, but not anymore. It's been a long time, and it kind of like, everything's kind of evened out. So, two off the top, no longer really happening in my life. Identity disturbance, markedly or persistent unstable self-image or sense of self. Again, up until about 3 years ago, this was hugely a problem. I was still doing the thing with jobs. I was still doing kitty cats. I was still doing the thing of, okay, I would get all these hobbies and I would go out and spend like, here's the number again, like let's say $300 to $500 on beads. And I thought that was going to be my thing. And like within a few weeks, I would become so bored, want nothing to do with it, and either give the stuff away or try to sell it or try to return it. And then it would be something else, and then it would be something else, and then it would be something else. It was like, I had a boss one time who just thought I was like this carefree spirit, and he got this poster and he put little yellow stickers with labels of all the different things I had tried in the course of the time that he knew me, and the thing was like covered. So identity disturbance was huge, but you know what? Through DBT, Dialectical Behavior Therapy, and you can learn a lot about it online, including on my website, and dbtselfhelp.com has a wealth of awesome information. Also, through the skills, I'm learning who I am, and that was my biggest concern, and I talk about that in my book too, is when they said we have a treatment for borderline personality disorder. When I was finally officially diagnosed with it a few years ago, we have a treatment, and my only thing I wanted to know, will I learn who I am? Will I know who I am? Because the chameleon identity aspect of it was the piece that I just was like losing it over. And the psychiatrist said yes, and that was the beginning of my journey. So through values, through trusting myself more, through noticing when I'm trying to please other people, I don't completely 100% have it together, but I have a pretty good sense of who I am. I don't always like who I am, but for the most part I like and love who I am, so that's tremendously changed. So that's 3 out of 3 for the top that are no longer met at this time. So it's not markedly or persistently unstable anymore, it's just not. Impulsive behavior in at least 2 areas that are potentially self-damaging. And we talked about spending, sex, substance abuse, reckless driving, binge eating. I will say that I sometimes have done the reckless driving, and I'm not proud of it, out of anger, out of frustration. But impulse behavior in at least 2 areas that are potentially self-damaging at this time, and not for a long time. I don't have that either, so that's number 4. Now, there are only 5 criteria left, and I would have to meet all 5 of them to currently still have the diagnosis. So, interestingly, as we come to the next one, I can already tell you I don't have that one. So, I currently am in recovery, guys. I currently do not meet the criteria for borderline personality disorder. I started with all of the criteria, and I currently do not meet enough of them to be considered having borderline personality disorder. What does that mean? Let me just continue through here, and I'll talk a little bit about that afterward. Okay, so recurrent suicidal behavior, gestures, threats, or self-harming. I don't do it anymore. I've learned ways to cope and tolerate with the distress of the emotions and the intensity of the emotions and the mood swings that would come up without going there. I don't go to the hospital anymore feeling suicidal. I don't threaten suicide. I don't even really think about it. So that's huge. That's a huge one. Emotional instability in reaction to day-to-day events, intense episodic sadness, irritability, or anxiety. Okay, I probably still have this one to a certain degree. But again, I am not meeting 5 out of 9 because we've gone through so many of them, and I haven't met them. So, but you know, this one I do still have sometimes. I am still a very sensitive person. I still experience emotion dysregulation. I still have mood swings. So I do experience this. Chronic feelings of emptiness, no, I do not. Sometimes when my significant other will go away, I will initially have that feeling, maybe for a day or 2, like it's like a fearful feeling and just kind of feeling alone and scared, but it's not really an empty feeling anymore. Inappropriate, intense anger or difficulty controlling anger, displays of anger. That one comes up for me. I think that's tied in a lot with the emotional instability and reaction to day-to-day events. I went for so many years between the anger with my husband and then like not expressing anger, showing it, or really like allowing myself to feel it out of fear, because my father was a very angry, abusive person and I didn't want to be like him, to starting to feel safe to feel and express my anger again, to sometimes it getting really intense and me getting mean. So I still do experience that sometimes. Transient stress-related paranoid ideation or severe dissociative symptoms, similar to the examples I gave earlier, I still have that as well. So the 3 symptoms of borderline personality disorder or criteria that I still have currently in my life are emotional instability in reaction to day-to-day events, inappropriate intense anger or difficulty controlling anger, and transient stress-related paranoid ideation or severe dissociative symptoms. Just 3 out of 9. I really hope that this gives you hope. As I'm reading the symptoms that I still have, I think of my friend Amanda Smith at My Dialectical Life, which if you don't know about her, please totally check her out. I think it's mydialecticallife.com. She does a daily DBT email skill by email, and she's in recovery as well. But she still acknowledges that she's a very sensitive person, that she experiences emotion dysregulation, and Teresa Lynn of Essence Happens, who is a life coach who specializes in BPD, is also in recovery from borderline personality disorder and doesn't deny that she also has some of these things coming up for her. And now I'm telling you that I am in recovery. I'm in recovery. And it's not that I don't have my bad days. It's not that you won't see me on Twitter from time to time, like having what may look like a crisis, or not being as skillful as I could be or should be. But I'm just so overjoyed with the progress that I've seen from the support that I've been able to get, and by diligently throwing myself into learning dialectical behavior therapy, like really just trusting the process, even though I just didn't think anything was going to work and that I was just going to be this way or that way for the rest of my life. It does not have to be this way for you. I want you to have hope. I don't want you to believe what other people say. I don't want you to pay attention when they put you down as you're always going to be like this, you're crazy, you're this, you're that. No, you're not. You are probably a hurting person who's been through hell and back in a handbasket, as they say. You're probably someone who's really hurting. You're probably someone who experiences his or her emotions intensely and does not know what the heck to do with them when they come up. It just feels out of control and you don't know another way to react than the way you've been reacting all along. You might think, how is this DBT going to help me, or whatever you decide, whatever type of therapy or resource you decide to work with, how is it really going to change my life? I am here to tell you that for me personally in my walk, it has. It obviously has, based on what I've shared. And you can read my story at my blog. You can kind of look back at the older posts up until now. You can see that even now I have episodes where things will happen and I'll relate it back to, okay, as a person with borderline personality disorder. I don't know if I can even say that anymore. I guess I have to say as an emotionally dysregulated person with the potential to be borderline, because I have been in the past, and I share what types of triggers and things I think are coming up that are causing different thoughts and behaviors. So I just hope that you continue to be encouraged. Thank you so much for watching. Again, I'm Debbie from healingfrombpd.org. I really look forward to your comments and questions. Please do post them below. I encourage you to. I'm going to make an effort to reply to each and every one of you under this video. I have to go because my cats are starting to get into my wigs and all kinds of good stuff. I think it's time for their dinner. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video and at my blog.